What would you do if a senator's daughter tried to text her way out of a DUI case in the middle of court, and the judge decided every single person in the room deserved to hear it out loud? Drop a comment telling us whether privilege ever really survives once the truth hits a microphone. Because before this story ends, one message will crack open a powerful family, expose a hidden pressure campaign, and force a young woman who thought consequences were negotiable to stare directly at the lives she changed on New Year's morning. Hit that subscribe button if you believe the courtroom should be the one place money and family names stop working. Like this video if you believe drunk driving is never just a mistake, when somebody else pays for it in blood, rehab, and nightmares. And share this with someone who needs to see what real accountability sounds like, because the moment that shook this courtroom did not come from a gavel, it came from a phone. By the time Judge Elena Ruiz leaned forward in Charleston County General Sessions Courtroom 3B on May 19, 2026, the room already felt overfull with tension. The gallery benches were packed with reporters, law students, courthouse regulars, and 3 different families who had not slept well in months. At the defense table sat Caroline Elise Langley, 26 years old, daughter of South Carolina State Senator Victor Langley, wearing a cream silk blouse under a tailored Navy Veronica beard blazer, her blonde hair pinned back too carefully, as if neatness itself could pass for innocence. She had once been the kind of woman local lifestyle magazines loved to photograph. Georgetown graduate, junior partner track at a boutique public affairs firm on King Street, white 2023 Range Rover Sport, St. Laurent tote, smile trained for fundraisers, ribbon cuttings, and captions about gratitude. She knew where to stand in a room. She knew how to laugh at the right volume. She knew how to make entitlement look like composure. What she did not know, at least not yet, was what it feels like when a room stops seeing your family name and starts seeing your choices. The case was listed on the monitor as State of South Carolina v. Caroline Elise Langley, case number 2026 GS 10417. Charges: felony DUI resulting in great bodily injury, reckless driving, unlawful use of a mobile device while operating a motor vehicle, and contempt issues reserved for later consideration depending on the morning's testimony. That last line mattered, though almost no one knew how much it would matter yet. The story officially began at 1:14 a.m. on January 1, 2026, but if you listened carefully, the people who knew Caroline would tell you it began years earlier, in quieter ways, with smaller rescues. A parking ticket fixed with a phone call. A college disciplinary complaint that vanished after a meeting no one could quite explain. A noise citation reduced to a warning. A summer wreck in Hilton Head quietly paid off before an insurance adjuster ever had to use the word pattern. Every close call had taught her the same lesson, not that she should stop, that she would be stopped for only so long. That New Year's Eve, she started at 8:30 p.m. in a private dining room at Hank's Seafood on Haines Street, moved to a rooftop party at the Watch overlooking the dark harbor, and ended at a crowded after midnight gathering inside a renovated carriage house off East Bay where the speakers were so loud the crystal on the drink cart trembled. Witnesses later described her in a silver retrofaired dress, black wool coat thrown over her shoulders, metallic Jimmy Choo heels in one hand by 12:40 a.m., champagne glass in the other. Security footage would show her laughing too hard at nothing, touching people mid-sentence as if balance had become optional. By 12:57 a.m., a valet named Corey Mendez testified she ignored his offer to call her a car. By 1:02 a.m., 2 of her friends, Blair Pennington and Tessa Long, were on video beside the curb outside the carriage house, one with a phone lifted to order a ride, both telling her not to drive. By 1:06 a.m., Caroline took her own keys anyway. She did not weave immediately. That's what made the footage unsettling. She drove like a person used to risk, not overwhelmed by it, confident, fast, deliberate. The Range Rover turned north on East Bay Street, past the old brick facade slick with sea air, and glided through one light just as it shifted yellow. At 1:12 a.m., a city camera caught the SUV drifting over the lane line. At 1:13:39, another camera near the intersection of Chapel and Washington showed the headlights jump toward the shoulder. The people on that sidewalk had almost no time. Andre Bell, 34, had just finished a late delivery shift for a seafood spot off Meeting Street. Former Marine, father of a 6-year-old girl named Zaria. He rode a black Honda ADV 160 scooter because it was cheaper than keeping his old truck alive, and because after his second deployment, he preferred the feeling of air over the feeling of metal. That night, he had parked near the curb and was unstrapping a thermal delivery bag from the back rack. Nina Flores, 38, an ICU nurse at MUSC, had just gotten off a 12-hour shift and was walking toward her sister's car with her son Mateo, who was 11 and still wearing a cheap glittery 2026 hat from a hospital family room celebration that had happened while his mother charted patient notes. Hassan Rahman, 52, an Uber driver from North Charleston, was paused at the curb in a silver Toyota Camry, hazard lights blinking, waiting for a passenger named Emily to come out of a townhouse with 2 slices of cake wrapped in foil. The Range Rover clipped the Camry first. That impact shoved the Toyota sideways. The Toyota's rear quarter spun into Andre's scooter. Andre hit the hood, then the pavement. The scooter went under the SUV. Nina tried to pull Mateo back and went down hard when the mirror caught her shoulder. Mateo struck the brick planter at the edge of the sidewalk face first. The sound, every witness later agreed, was wrong. Not like a movie crash, not one clean bang. It was metal screaming, glass spitting, a child crying, somebody yelling no before silence rushed in and got torn apart by more yelling. Drop a comment telling us the exact moment you think this stopped being a young person made a mistake story and became something much darker. Because for the people on that sidewalk, the answer was immediate. Officer Daniel Mercer arrived at 1:18 a.m. His body cam footage, later played frame by frame in court, began with the wash of blue lights over wet pavement and a voice in the distance saying, "He can't move. Do not move him. Somebody hold his head." Mercer, 33, former Coast Guard, calm even when scenes tilted chaotic, moved first toward Mateo because children go to the front of your senses whether you mean them to or not. The boy's upper lip was split. Blood had dried in a line down his chin. He kept asking if his mom's leg was broken. Then Mercer turned, and there she was. Caroline stood beside the open driver's door, hair loose now, one heel missing, mascara blurred under one eye, looking offended in a way that stunned people when they first saw the tape. Not scared, not horrified, offended. Her Range Rover's front grille was folded inward. Steam rose in pale ribbons. A champagne-colored airbag sagged from the steering wheel like a burst lung. Mercer asked the first question officers always ask. "Ma'am, are you injured?" And Caroline answered with the first quote that would spread through Charleston before sunrise. "I'm fine, but this is about to become a circus if you don't handle it correctly." Not "Are they okay?" Not "I'm sorry." Not "Please help them." That. Mercer asked if she had been drinking. She laughed once, small and sharp. "It's New Year's." He asked again. "I had a glass of champagne at midnight, maybe 2. Everybody did." Then he asked for her license, and she said the line that set the gallery against her months before the judge ever did. "Officer, please don't make this uglier than it needs to be. My father is Senator Victor Langley." Even now, people pause when they hear that clip, because it tells you almost everything about who she was at 1:18 a.m. She did not see a public servant standing in front of injured strangers. She saw a problem to be managed. Mercer's voice did not rise. "Your father's title does not change what happened here." That line made the evening news, But what came next hit harder. From the left side of the frame, as paramedics worked over Andre, you could hear him trying to breathe through pain and saying, "My phone. Please call my daughter's mom. Tell her I'm gonna miss breakfast." It is one of those sentences that can split a room because it is so ordinary. Not "tell them I love them." Not "I think I'm dying." Breakfast. The tiny daily promise that tells you exactly how a life gets interrupted. Like this video, if you believe the smallest details are often the ones that break your heart the hardest. Mercer conducted field sobriety tests under the amber flicker of a damaged street lamp. Caroline swayed during the horizontal gaze test, missed heel-to-toe twice on the walk-in turn, lifted the wrong foot first. On the one-leg stand she snapped, "This is absurd. I'm wearing one shoe." Her preliminary breath test registered 0.14, nearly double the legal limit. At 1:43 a.m., as Mercer told her she was under arrest, she pulled her arm back and hissed, low but audible, "You have no idea how stupid this is going to look for you in 48 hours." That clip, more than any other, lit the outrage fuse, not because it was dramatic, because it felt familiar. People have spent their whole lives watching certain kinds of power assume the future belongs to them. In that sentence, Caroline did not threaten him with violence. She threatened him with the system, with Ness, with influence, with the soft machinery that moves behind doors. The body cam rolled while she sat in the back of the patrol car, and Face ID failed twice because her hands were shaking. She stared at the protective cage and said, "Can I please just get my attorney before this turns into a fundraiser for every loser in the county?" That sentence would be quoted in op-eds, barbershops, message boards, and dinner tables for weeks. But even then, the case still looked depressingly familiar. Privileged defendant, ugly crash, public outrage, experienced defense team, quiet efforts to settle, maybe a tearful statement, maybe a reduced charge, maybe probation with language about promise and potential. Then the hospital reports came in. Andre Bell had a shattered left acetabulum, 2 fractured ribs, a broken right wrist, and nerve damage in his left foot. The orthopedic surgeon wrote that recovery would likely require multiple procedures and that prolonged pain with reduced mobility was expected. Translation: he would not be riding anything for a long time, and the work he did to support his daughter would not wait patiently for him to heal. Nina Flores tore her ACL and meniscus, suffered a moderate concussion, and developed vertigo severe enough that she could not return to ICU shifts for months. She had spent years helping other people stand after the worst nights of their lives. Now she needed help getting into the shower. Mateo needed 8 stitches above his lip and began waking up at 1:14 a.m. for weeks, according to his mother's later testimony, asking if headlights could climb walls. Hassan Rahman had a cervical strain and persistent numbness down his right arm. His Camry, his income source, was totaled. Insurance fights started by the second week, as they always do. Caroline made bond the next afternoon. Her father did not speak to cameras, but his office released a statement at 4:22 p.m. describing the crash as an unfortunate incident and asking the public to respect the family's privacy as legal proceedings unfold. That phrase landed like acid. Unfortunate incident. Not 4 damaged bodies. Not 1 city block of blood and shattered glass. An unfortunate incident. Everybody in Charleston had an opinion by dinner. Everybody thought they knew where the story was going. They were wrong. Because inside Judge Ruiz's courtroom, months later, the first thing that changed everything was not the text message. It was a pair of shoes. On the first day of evidentiary hearings, Caroline arrived in black patent Louboutin pumps that clicked across the courtroom floor like little acts of denial. It sounds petty until you saw the victim's side. Andre entered with a cane. Nina wore a hinged brace beneath a navy dress and orthopedic sneakers. Mateo, in a button-down shirt his aunt had ironed, stared at the floor whenever Caroline looked his way. There are moments when class difference stops being abstract and becomes almost cruelly visual. One side dressed for damage control, the other dressed around damage. Judge Elena Ruiz noticed everything. She always had. 58 years old, silver streak at one temple, former public defender, known for a voice so controlled that lawyers leaned in rather than interrupt. She had sentenced gang leaders, embezzlers, abusers, and one former county treasurer whose apology she described as a resume in mourning clothes. She did not grandstand. That made her more dangerous to dishonest people, not less. When the assistant solicitor, Priya Shah, rose to begin, she did not thunder. She laid the case out like brick. On January 1st, at approximately 1:14 in the morning, the defendant chose to drive after drinking. She also chose to ignore repeated offers of safe transportation. She also chose to use her status, first at the scene and then in the weeks that followed, as if influence were a form of first aid. The state will prove not only impairment but attitude, not only injury but indifference. Wesley Boone, Caroline's defense attorney, stood after her. Boone was 62, tan in the way expensive men get tan, cuffs stiff, voice honeyed. He specialized in affluent panic, fraternity assault, securities trouble, family scandal with a billing code. He admitted the crash was serious. He acknowledged Caroline had made terrible decisions. Then he began constructing the usual bridge from guilt to sympathy. She is not the caricature this case has become online. She is a young woman with no prior criminal convictions, severe untreated grief from the loss of her mother at 17, a documented anxiety disorder, and profound remorse. The law punishes actions, not headlines. Good line, smooth line. Some jurists might even have nodded. Judge Ruiz did not. The first witness was Officer Mercer. Priya Shah played the body cam without embellishment. Gasps came not at the crash scene itself but at Caroline's tone. The gallery shifted. One woman in the back whispered, "Oh my God, W." Hen Caroline said, "This is about to become a circus if you don't handle it correctly." Another muttered something not fit for court when the senator line came through the speakers. Then Priya froze the frame on Caroline's face at the moment. She looked over Mercer's shoulder toward the paramedics. "Officer Mercer," Priya asked, "did the defendant at any point ask you whether the victims were alive?" "No, ma'am." "Did she ask whether there was a child involved?" "No, ma'am." "Did she apologize at the scene?" "No, ma'am." "Did she mention her father?" "Yes, ma'am." "How soon?" "Within about a minute of me starting contact." That answer landed like a stone dropped into still water. Everyone in the room felt the ripples. Boone tried to recover on cross. He got Mercer to admit Caroline appeared disoriented. He suggested shock can make people sound detached. Mercer agreed that trauma affects behavior. Then Boone asked whether Mercer had ever encountered suspects who spoke poorly under stress but later showed remorse. Mercer said yes. Boone smiled slightly. So the statements captured that night may not represent the full person. Mercer looked at Caroline, then back at Boone. The statements represented the person I met that night. That line made 3 reporters look up at once. Hit that subscribe button if you know the calmest answers are often the ones that hit the hardest. After Mercer came the surveillance footage. One camera from a boutique hotel showed the Range Rover clipping Hassan's Camry. Another from a row house entry showed Andre's scooter dragged several feet before bouncing free in a shower of sparks. A third, lower quality but devastating, caught Mateo's small body disappearing behind the blur of a planter as Nina reached for him. Courtrooms do not react the way television says they do. There is rarely one dramatic scream. More often it is collective breath-changing shape. A cough held back. A chair creaking at the wrong time. One hand going to one mouth. In Courtroom 3B, the sound was silence trying very hard not to become grief. Then Priya Shah introduced the emergency room records. She read them plainly. Glasgow scores, imaging results, surgical consults, medication lists, estimated recovery windows, but the words did not stay clinical for long. When she read the line noting that Mateo became acutely distressed upon hearing approaching traffic outside pediatric observation, Nina lowered her head and covered her eyes. When Priya read that Andre had asked nursing staff whether he would be able to walk his daughter to school in the fall, Andre stared at the counsel table as if anger itself were holding him upright. Boone objected twice. Judge Ruiz overruled twice. Then came the first real twist. Priya called a witness the defense had not expected to matter as much as he did. The valet, Corey Mendez, 21 years old, College of Charleston Jr., rented tux vest slightly too big, voice nervous at first. He testified that Caroline was offered a ride, that she refused, that he specifically said, "Miss Langley, please don't drive. It's amateur night out there." That she took her keys from his hand and replied, "I'm 5 minutes from home and I'm not waiting on strangers." Boone tried to shake him. "You serve hundreds of guests, correct?" "Yes, sir." "You were working a holiday rush?" "Yes, sir." "So your memory could be imperfect?" Corey swallowed. "No, sir." "Why not?" "Because my cousin was killed by a drunk driver 3 years ago, and when I say I told someone not to drive, I remember." That is the kind of testimony you cannot plan around. It carries its own gravity. Suddenly Corey was not a valet in a vest. He was a person with his own ledger of loss, and Caroline had stepped right into it. Still, Boone had one card left, and it nearly worked. He called Dr. Melissa Vane, a forensic psychologist, who testified Caroline had entered intensive outpatient treatment after the crash, had begun trauma counseling related to her mother's death, and showed genuine emerging recognition of the human impact of impaired driving. Dr. Vane described childhood overprotection, grief suppression, and a pattern of emotional avoidance reinforced by social privilege. It was a polished way of saying Caroline had never learned to hear no, in time to save herself from becoming the kind of person everyone else has to survive. For the first time, a sliver of empathy entered the room. Then Caroline took the stand. That was Boone's gamble. He believed the public version of her had become so monstrous that only her own voice could soften it. At first, he seemed right. Caroline spoke quietly. She admitted she had drunk far more than I ever should have. She acknowledged turning down a ride. She said she lived with shame. She said she hated the body cam footage because that person sounds cold and awful, and I was cold and awful. When Boone asked why, she answered with surprising honesty. "Because my whole life went so. Everything went wrong. My instinct was never to stop and ask who I hurt. It was to figure out how fast I could contain it." Several people looked up at that. It sounded real. Then Boone asked whether she had tried to contact the victims. Caroline said yes, through counsel. Whether she had entered treatment voluntarily. Yes. Whether she accepted full responsibility. And here, almost invisibly, she ruined herself again. "I accept responsibility for what happened," she said, "even though some of the public conversation has exaggerated who I am." Not the worst sentence ever spoken in court, but the wrong one. Too soon, too careful, too concerned with image. Judge Ruiz wrote something down. Priya Shah saw it. On cross, Priya moved with surgical patience. "Ms. Langley, did you tell Officer Mercer this case would look stupid for him in 48 hours? Caroline inhaled. "I did. I was intoxicated and panicking." "Did you tell him your father was Senator Victor Langley?" "Yes." "Because you hoped it would affect his conduct." "I don't know what I hoped. I was overwhelmed." "Did you ask about the victims?" "No." "Did you ask whether a child had been injured?" "No." "Did you tell the court just now that you accept full responsibility?" "Yes." Priya stepped closer. "Then why, 2 weeks after the crash, did you send your friend Blair Pennington a message saying, If that nurse hadn't been standing so close to the curb, this would be a property case. The room froze. Boone shot up, objection. Priya held up a printed exhibit obtained through subpoena from Blair's phone after deletion attempts. Judge Ruiz had already reviewed it in chambers. Overruled. Caroline's face lost color in a visible wave. Priya repeated the question. Caroline whispered, "I wrote it, I didn't mean it." "You wrote it?" "Yes." "You wrote it while Andre Bell was still using a walker?" "Yes." "You wrote it while Mateo Flores was still waking up at 1:14 every night?" Boone objected again, overruled again. Caroline's eyes filled. "I was ashamed and angry and trying to make it smaller." Priya nodded once. "That may be the most truthful thing you've said." Everyone in the room knew the case had just tilted, not because the text proved guilt. Guilt was never really the fight. It proved mindset. It proved that what the body cam showed was not one terrible night alone. It was a world view with a hangover. Share this with someone who needs to see how fast a single line can strip the polish off a public apology. By the lunch recess, courthouse halls buzzed like a live wire. Local reporters called editors. A legal analyst from Columbia posted that the state had punctured the remorse narrative. People refreshed feeds. Clips spread. Court sketch artists redrew Caroline with harsher shadows. And still, somehow, none of that was the moment this story would be remembered for. That came later after lunch, when the victims spoke. Andre Bell walked slowly to the witness stand, each step measured, cane in his right hand, suit jacket hanging a little crooked because of his wrist. He had the face of a man who had not planned to become symbolic and did not enjoy it. Priya asked about his injuries. He answered in plain terms: surgery, screws, physical therapy 3 times a week, burning pain in his hip when rain moved in off the water, lost income, lost independence. Lost the ability to pick up his daughter without doing math first. Then she asked what hurt most. He looked at Caroline for the first time. "I used to run up the apartment stairs with groceries and my kid on my shoulders. Now my little girl asks if she should carry my laundry." No one moved, not the clerk, not the bailiff, not Caroline. Andre described Zaria learning not to ask him to race. He described missing her Saturday soccer opener because he was in rehab. He described smiling through FaceTime so she would not see him grimace. He did not shout. He did not insult Caroline. He simply made the damage visible, which is a far more devastating skill. Then Priya asked whether he had received any outreach from the Langley family. Andre said yes, not from Caroline directly. From a lawyer representing a family advisor tied to Senator Langley's office. The outreach included an offer to cover some medical costs in exchange for a confidentiality agreement and a request that public statements remain measured pending legal resolution. Boone objected. Judge Ruiz allowed limited inquiry. "Did you sign anything?" Priya asked. "No." "Why not?" Andre shifted on the stand. "Because my daughter needs rent, but she also needs me to be able to look her in the eye." That line ricocheted through the gallery. Next came Nina Flores. She wore her nurse's pin on her lapel like armor. Her voice trembled only once, when describing how helpless it felt to be on the pavement, dizzy and half-twisted, hearing Mateo cry and not being able to get to him quickly enough. She testified about the vertigo, the headaches, the unpaid time off, the humiliation of needing coworkers to help fill out disability forms. Then Priya asked what the hardest part had been for Mateo. Nina's answer was so small, it forced the room to lean in. "He doesn't like fireworks anymore." A New Year's DUI took fireworks from an 11-year-old boy. That detail spread through the room like cold. When Mateo was called, Boone asked for leniency in the questioning. Judge Ruiz allowed it. Mateo climbed into the witness chair too carefully, as children do when they know adults are watching for signs of damage. Priya kept it simple. Mateo, do you remember what happened? Yes. What do you remember most? The lights. What lights? The car lights, they got big. Do you still think about that? He nodded. Do you have trouble sleeping? Another nod. Then came the question no one was ready for. Is there anything you want Ms. Langley to know? Mateo looked straight at Caroline and said, I wish you stopped when everyone told you to. Not screamed, not dramatic, just true, the kind of truth that cannot be out-argued by a $600 tie. Like this video, if you believe some of the strongest testimony, a courtroom can hear comes in the smallest voice. By now, Caroline's posture had changed. The lifted chin was gone. Her hands had begun clasping and unclasping in her lap. When court recessed again, she did not lean toward her father, who sat in the second row in a charcoal Brioni suit, jaw tight, silver cuff links catching the fluorescent light. She did not look at the press either. She stared at the defense table as if its wood grain contained instructions for becoming another person before 2:00 p.m. But privilege rarely gives up cleanly. It fights hardest when its senses collapse. At 2:07 p.m., Priya Shah returned with what she called supplemental evidence relevant to remorse, witness influence, and credibility. Boone objected before she even named it. The judge heard argument at sidebar. Nobody in the gallery could hear the words, but everyone could read body language. Priya calm, Boone heated, Judge Ruiz still. The stillness was what made people nervous. Still judges are often deciding. The evidence was a series of phone logs, staff emails, and one voicemail transcription tying a political consultant retained by Senator Langley's donor network to outreach toward both Andre Bell and Nina Flores in the first 3 weeks after the crash. The outreach was couched in soft language: welfare checks, recovery assistance, concerns about media frenzy. But one line in a February 3 voicemail to Andre's landlord, played for the court, carried a different smell. We're trying to help all parties move forward without unnecessary noise. That phrase, unnecessary noise, landed almost as badly as unfortunate incident had months earlier. Boone argued it was not directly attributable to Caroline. Priya agreed, technically. But she argued it spoke to the atmosphere around the case, the ecosystem of pressure in which remorse had been packaged. Judge Ruiz allowed the evidence for limited context. Then she looked directly at Caroline and asked the question that should have ended the day cleanly. Ms. Langley, while on release, were you instructed not to communicate about this matter except through counsel? Yes, Your Honor. Have you complied with that instruction? Yes, Your Honor. She answered too quickly. Maybe that is why Bailiff Marcus Dunn noticed the phone glow. Defendants were not supposed to have active phones out during proceedings. Most complied because contempt is boring and expensive. But just as Priya began to call her next witness, a light flickered beneath Caroline's folder. Marcus leaned in. Caroline jerked her hand back. It was a tiny movement, but everyone near the front saw it. Judge Ruiz saw it too. Ms. Langley, she said not loudly, placed the phone on the table. Caroline did not move. Now, the room went so quiet you could hear the air system hum above the bench. Caroline slowly placed a rose gold iPhone face down beside her legal pad. Boone leaned toward her, whispering urgently. Senator Langley shifted in his seat for the first time all day. Judge Ruiz asked Marcus Dunn to retrieve the device. Boone was on his feet instantly. Your Honor, this is privileged territory. Ruiz held out a hand. Counsel, if your client was using a phone in my courtroom during active proceedings after repeated advisements, I will determine first whether that use implicates my order. Sit down. He sat, but only physically. Marcus handed the phone to the clerk, Helen Pike, who glanced at the lock screen. Her expression changed, not dramatically, just enough. Judge Ruiz noticed that too. Ms. Pike. Helen swallowed. Your Honor, the screen preview shows an outgoing message timestamped 2:08 p.m. to contact listed as Dad. No one breathed. Ruiz asked the obvious, does the preview show content? Helen looked again, part of it yes. Read the visible portion. Boone rose, object. Tian. Overruled. Helen's voice was steady but barely. It says, if she says jail, call Boone's friend on the ethics board and make this woman regret today. The rest was cut off. If there had been a thunderclap outside, it could not have done more to the room. Gasps, a man in the back whispering, no way. One reporter half standing before catching herself. Senator Langley going pale in a way expensive men almost never allow themselves to do in public. Caroline closing her eyes like she might disappear if she made herself small enough. This was the moment. The one people replayed. The one clipped and reposted and debated in living rooms and law schools and state house offices. But the most unforgettable part had not happened yet. Judge Ruiz looked at Boone. Does counsel wish to assert privilege over an apparent threat directed at this court? Boone's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Your Honor, I need to confer with my client. You may do so in 30 seconds. The conference looked less like strategy and more like panic translated into whispers. Caroline shook her head twice. Boone spoke faster. Senator Langley stood, then sat when Marcus Dunn looked at him. 30 seconds later, Boone straightened. Your Honor, my client states the message was emotional venting, not a literal instruction. Judge Ruiz did not blink. Did she send it? Boone hesitated one fatal beat too long. Yes. Ruiz turned to Helen Pike. Unlock the device through the defendant. Caroline looked stunned. Your Honor. Now Ms. Langley. Her hands trembled as she keyed in the passcode. Ruiz then said the sentence that made national legal blogs quote her for days. A courtroom is the one room where a last name is supposed to get smaller. Then she nodded to Helen, placed the phone audio on the evidence speaker, and read the full thread. That is what the title of this story never captures completely. It was not theatrical. It was procedural coldness wielded at exactly the right temperature. Helen connected the phone to the courtroom evidence system so the microphone would carry every word. The room's overhead speakers crackled once. And then the texts were read. 2:02 p.m. from Dad. Boone says Ruiz is playing to the cameras. Keep your face soft. 2:04 p.m. from Caroline. I am trying. Belle is making me look like a monster. 2:05 p.m. from Dad. Then stop reacting. Cry if you need to. Donors are already asking questions. 2:06 p.m. from Caroline. What if she actually jails me? 2:08 p.m. from Caroline. If she says jail, call Boone's friend on the ethics board and make this woman regret today. I am not going to county because of these people. 2:08 p.m. from Dad, unsent draft open in thread. Delete this. We will talk tonight. Not one person in that room will ever forget the silence that followed. It was the kind of silence that feels heavier than sound. The kind where everybody understands all at once that they are witnessing a mask crack in real time. Even Senator Langley seemed to know it. He lowered his head and did not look up. Then came the whispering, small, furious, disbelieving whispering. One woman in the second row said, because of these people, as if the phrase itself had cut her. Andre's sister covered her mouth. Nina stared straight ahead, tears running without her bothering to wipe them. Judge Ruiz let the silence sit. That was part of the punishment too. Then she spoke. Ms. Langley, did you just refer to the people whose bodies you damaged as these people, while seated 10 feet from them? Caroline's voice cracked. Yes, Your Honor. Did you just propose retaliatory abuse of a public ethics process against this court? Yes, Your Honor. Did your father coach your courtroom demeanor during live proceedings? Boone objected, but it dissolved in the air. Caroline looked at her father. He still would not look up. Yes. That one word changed everything. Drop a comment telling us whether that was the exact second justice began, because everyone in the room knew the case had crossed from reckless privilege into something uglier. Priya Shah did not smile. Good prosecutors know better, but when she stood, there was iron in her voice. Your Honor, the state moves to revoke bond immediately and requests the court consider this thread as evidence that whatever remorse has been presented here today is, at minimum, unstable and contaminated by ongoing efforts to manipulate process. Boone tried, he truly tried. He argued panic, immaturity, catastrophic judgment under pressure. He argued that contempt of court, while serious, should not erase months of treatment. He argued family dynamics. He argued Caroline was spiraling, not scheming. Then Judge Ruiz asked Caroline if she wished to speak before the court ruled on bond. This was the fork in the road, the consequence moment, the point where a person either reaches for the old self or steps, however clumsily, toward a new one. Caroline stood. For the first few seconds, she looked like every defendant who hopes tears will arrive before words do. Then something stranger happened. The tears did come, but they did not rescue her. They made her uglier, human uglier, mascara streaking, breath hitching, voice gone raw. I don't know how to defend myself anymore, she said. No polished rhythm, no strategic cadence, just that. Judge Ruiz said nothing. Caroline swallowed hard. I keep trying to sound better than what I did, better than what I thought, better than what I said when I was drunk and after I was sober and even today. And every time I do, it gets worse because it's still me. That text is me. The body cam is me. The message to Blair is me. The person who thought this could be contained is me. Now the room was listening in a new way. She turned very slowly toward the victims. Mr. Bell, Ms. Flores, Mateo, Mr. Rahman, I have not wanted to feel the full shape of what I did because I thought if I did, it would crush me. But it was already crushing you. I just kept making other people carry it. You could hear someone crying quietly behind the rail. Then came the sentence nobody expected from her. My father taught me how to survive scandal. He did not teach me how to tell the truth. Senator Langley finally looked up. That was the first time pain appeared on his face, not for reputation but for recognition. Not all fathers are villains. Some are architects of ruin without meaning to be. That was the complexity entering the room. Boone tugged lightly at Caroline's sleeve, perhaps to signal enough. She kept going. I wrote that text because I was still trying to use the same machine that built me. I am ashamed of it. Not the kind of shame that wants this hidden. The kind that knows hiding is the disease. That line hit hard enough that one reporter stopped typing and just stared. Judge Ruiz listened with folded hands. When Caroline finished, Ruiz revoked bond. Not as final sentence, as immediate consequence. You will be remanded pending sentencing and contempt review, the judge said. Not because you are beyond redemption, but because redemption and control are not the same thing, and you have spent this entire case confusing them. Marcus Dunn stepped forward. Shackles were not used, but the emotional effect was the same. Caroline turned once toward her father. He half rose as if instinct might outrun humiliation. It could not. And that could have been the viral ending right there. Senator's daughter exposed, judge unmoved, bond revoked. A neat package for outrage. Millions would have watched that and called it satisfying. Most competitors would stop there. But real stories with staying power do not end at humiliation. They begin there. The sentencing hearing was continued for 3 weeks. Those 3 weeks changed everyone. Caroline spent 19 days in county holding before being transferred to a women's unit 2 counties overdue to media attention. No glamour there. No soft focus. Fluorescent dawn. Thin mattress. Plastic spoon. first-name basis with women whose lives had never come with donation dinners or campaign signs. She later wrote that the first night the door locked behind her, she understood for the first time that silence can have walls. Senator Langley, meanwhile, faced ethics complaints, press ambushes, and a party leadership statement distancing itself from any appearance of attempted influence in ongoing judicial matters. Donors called, opponents smiled too carefully. A legislative aide resigned. Local papers dug up other stories. A parking fix from 2019. A sealed campus incident. Small clues of a family long cushioned by invisible hands. Not enough for indictment, enough for pattern. And the victims kept living real lives. Andre kept going to therapy because healing does not pause for headlines. Nina returned to limited duty, though still dizzy on sudden turns. Mateo started seeing a child counselor who taught him grounding exercises using cold objects, breathing counts, and the naming of colors in a room whenever headlights triggered panic. Hassan borrowed his brother-in-law's minivan and tried to rebuild enough rideshare income to keep from losing his apartment. Then something unexpected happened. Caroline wrote letters. Not to the press, not to the court first, to the victims. Handwritten online jail stationery. No logo, no legal phrasing, no consultant polish. She sent them through counsel because that was the rule, but the words were hers. Priya Shah reviewed them before the next hearing. So did Judge Ruiz in camera for appropriateness. The victims were free to read or ignore them. Andre read his in the parking lot of his rehab center. Nina left hers unopened on a kitchen counter for 2 days. Hassan read his immediately, then read it again. Mateo's was rooted through Nina, and she read it alone first. What did the letters say? Not magic, not enough. Nothing can equal a shattered hip or a child who fears headlights, but they contained a new language. Caroline did not say, "I'm not that person." She said, "I was that person." She did not say, "I hope you can forgive me." She said, "You do not owe me relief from what I've done." She did not say, "This has been hard on me too." She said, "My discomfort has never been the central fact of this story, and I kept trying to make it one." There is power in hearing somebody stop narrating around themselves. Like this video, if you believe real remorse sounds different from polished regret. On June 9, 2026, Courtroom 3 be filled again for sentencing. This time Caroline did not wear designer heels. She appeared in a plain charcoal suit from the jail transport wardrobe under a borrowed cardigan, hair pulled back without style, no jewelry except the rubber band on her wrist. Weeks earlier that image would have looked like collapse. Now it looked like a person stripped down to whether truth could survive without costume. Before arguments began, Judge Ruiz addressed the contempt issue first. She found Caroline in contempt for violating courtroom rules and attempting to communicate about influencing proceedings. She sentenced her to 30 days concurrent with whatever final custodial sentence the DUI conviction would carry. Then she moved to allocution and victim impact. Andre spoke first again, but his tone had changed. "I came in here wanting the maximum. I won't lie about that," he said. "After the phone thing, I wanted her buried under every day the statute could give, because I was tired of rich people learning lessons in op-eds instead of consequences." The gallery murmured. Andre continued, "Then I read the letter, and I talked to my daughter, and I asked myself what I actually wanted. Did I want her gone for a while so everybody could clap? Or did I want her changed in a way that might stop one more person from doing this to somebody else?" That question hung in the room. He shifted his cane. "I still want jail. Let me be clear. There has to be a penalty. But if the court asks me what justice looks like after that, it doesn't look like a quiet return to comfort. It looks like labor. It looks like her standing in trauma wards and schools and rehab rooms saying my name and my daughter's name and that little boy's name, and not being allowed to leave until it costs her something every day." That was the compassion twist, though it did not feel soft. It felt harder than vengeance. Nina Flores followed. She had not decided, she said, whether forgiveness was even the right word, but she believed in useful consequences. She wanted Caroline banned from driving for as long as legally possible. She wanted substantial restitution. She wanted mandated speaking work in hospitals and high schools. She wanted treatment that could be audited, not simply reported by hired experts. Then she said the sentence that made even Judge Ruiz lift her eyes. Mercy is not the opposite of justice. It is what justice looks like when truth finally gets through. That line spread far beyond Charleston. Hassan Rahman, quieter than the others, said he agreed with Andre. If she goes away and comes back the same, then prison only punished taxpayers and gave us a headline. I want to know if she can become useful. And then, against every expectation, Nina asked if Mateo wanted to say something. Judge Ruiz allowed it. Mateo stood beside his mother instead of taking the witness chair this time. He looked at Caroline and said, "I don't forgive you yet, but I don't want you to be fake anymore." There are moments a room witnesses and immediately understands it will never forget. This was another one. Hit that subscribe button if you believe truth from a child can do what lawyers and headlines never can. Now it was Caroline's turn. She stood more slowly than before, not because she was trying to look solemn, because she had spent 3 weeks sleeping on steel and listening to women cry through walls, because some weights are invisible until they change how a person rises from a chair. I asked for this court to see me as redeemable before I proved I was honest, she said. That was backwards. I thought tears counted as transformation. They don't. Exposure is not the same thing as change. She looked at Judge Ruiz. If you send me to prison, I will go. If you decide I should spend years paying this debt in public, I will do that. I don't have a request. I only have an acknowledgement. The life I had before this was built on people cleaning up behind me. That ends here if your sentence means anything at all. Then she turned toward her father. Everyone noticed. Dad, I love you, but I will not be protected from this anymore. Victor Langley's face broke in a way no camera flash could soften. He nodded once, barely, like a man realizing too late that every shortcut he paved had led to this bench. Priya Shah recommended a substantial custodial sentence, full restitution, lifetime publication of speaking commitments, ignition interlock requirement. If driving privileges were ever restored, intensive alcohol treatment, and a judicially monitored restorative program. Boone asked for leniency paired with structured accountability. Both knew the judge had already reached the deepest part of her decision. Judge Elena Ruiz took off her glasses, folded them, and began. This court has heard pain. It has heard arrogance. It has heard performance. Today, for the first time, it has also heard some truth. She paused. The law does not exist to satisfy our appetite for either vengeance or sentiment. It exists to mark a moral line and then enforce it. She looked at Caroline. Ms. Langley, privilege is not a seat belt. It does not restrain bad judgment. It only delays impact until more people get hurt. That quote would lead every article by evening. Ruiz continued, "You were not prosecuted because you are a senator's daughter. You remained on trial in the public mind because you behaved as though rules were for other families. The body cam showed that. Your private messages confirmed it. The courtroom text removed all doubt." She then did something no pundit predicted exactly. She sentenced Caroline to 18 months in state custody, with 6 months to be served in prison, and the balance suspended upon successful completion of 5 years supervised probation, but only under unusually strict conditions. Lifetime revocation was not available under the statute as charged, but Ruiz imposed a 10-year license suspension, ignition interlock upon any future reinstatement, full restitution to all victims, mandatory inpatient treatment followed by monitored outpatient care, 2,000 hours of verified community service focused exclusively on trauma medicine, victim support, an anti-impaired driving education, and a court-supervised speaking program requiring Caroline to tell the full truth, including the courtroom text, at no fewer than 50 public events over 3 years. Then came the unexpected twist, around which people argued for months. Judge Ruiz ordered that, after release from custody and with victims' consent only, Caroline would participate in a restorative justice conference process with the victims every 6 months for 2 years, overseen by a licensed facilitator and reported to the court. If she lied, minimized, missed sessions, or attempted image management through media surrogates, the suspended portion of the sentence could be activated. Some thought it was genius. Some thought it was too merciful. Some thought it was the harshest sentence of all. Ruiz ended with a line that became one of the most shared courtroom quotes of the year. "Money can buy quiet, it cannot buy rewind." The gavel came down once. And just like that, the legal chapter closed. But the human one did not. Share this with someone who thinks justice ends when a judge speaks, because the hardest part of accountability usually starts after the cameras leave. Caroline reported to Camille Griffin Graham Correctional Institution 2 weeks later. Her father resigned from committee leadership before the summer session. By September, he announced he would not seek re-election, citing family obligations and the need for honest private reckoning. Cynics mocked it, maybe fairly, but people close to the family later said he had stopped calling old contacts, stopped asking who could help, stopped saying, "We can manage this." Failure had finally taught him what power never had. Inside prison, Caroline's world shrank to routine: wake times, counts, laundry, food you do not eat because you enjoy it, women who could smell performance the way dogs smell storms. She was not famous there in any useful way. If anything, the senator angle only made people watch her longer to see if she would crack or fake humility. She learned quickly that contrition means little when somebody else still has to use the phone after you, still has to clean the sink after you, still has to decide if your apology is just another way of asking to be comforted. She did not transform overnight. That would be a worse story, not a better one. At first, she kept correcting people with polished speech, kept saying things like "I understand" before she actually did. One older inmate named Rochelle, serving time for fraud, told her on day 9, "Baby, the rich girl disease is not thinking you're better. It's thinking insight counts as repair." Caroline wrote that down and kept it. By month 3, she had stopped trying to sound healed. When she was released in December 2026 to begin the suspended portion and community accountability program, Charleston media waited outside. She gave one statement and one statement only. "I'm not asking to be welcomed back. I'm reporting for the rest of my sentence." No self-pity, no rebrand, no soft launch redemption. And then she went to work. Her first mandated talk was at Trident Technical College's nursing program auditorium in January 2027. She stood in front of 200 students and did something the court had required but could not fake for her. She named the victims, all of them. She described the crash minute by minute. She read her own body cam quotes aloud. You could feel the room flinch when she repeated, "My father is Senator Victor Langley." Then she read the courtroom text, out loud. No shortening, no euphemisms. If she says jail, call Boone's friend on the ethics board and make this woman regret today. A student in the 3rd row cried. At a high school in Mount Pleasant, a junior asked why anyone should believe she was sorry now. Caroline answered, "You shouldn't because I say I am. You should only believe patterns you can verify." That answer got shared because it was quotable, yes, but also because it finally sounded like a person who understood trust as a debt instead of a mood. At MUSC's Trauma Wing volunteer program, she sorted supply carts, cleaned family waiting rooms, and sat through victim support trainings where nobody cared who her father had been in the Senate. Nina Flores saw her once near the elevators helping an older man fill out visitation paperwork. Neither woman spoke. Not then. Andre Bell's progress was slower. Pain stayed. Limp stayed. Some anger stayed too, honest and hot. But he attended the first restorative conference in March 2027. So did Nina. So did Hassan. Mateo chose not to attend the first one. He sent a drawing instead. A road, a red light, a blue car stopped behind a white line. Under it he wrote, "This is what stopping looks like." The facilitator placed the drawing on the table before the meeting began. Caroline cried when she saw it, but the crying did not derail the process. That mattered. Old Caroline might have made her tears the event. Newer Caroline let them be background weather while other people spoke. Andre told her about missing Zaria's field day race. Nina told her about being afraid in crosswalks. Hassan told her what it feels like when one totaled car becomes a whole season of late rent. Caroline did not interrupt, did not explain, did not say, "I know." She said, "I did that." Over and over where needed, not performatively, specifically. There is a quote often attributed in many ways, but Judge Ruiz had her own version, and it resurfaced in discussions of this case for months. Remorse that arrives only after exposure is strategy. Remorse that survives labor may become character. People debated whether Caroline had reached the second half. That debate was fair. Redemption is not a press release. It is a long audition with no guaranteed applause. Like this video, if you believe second chances should be earned in public, not announced in private. By summer 2027, the speaking program had made Caroline one of the most talked-about figures in regional justice circles. Some invited her because of notoriety, some because students listened, some because the story combined the three things modern audiences never resist: power, humiliation, and the possibility of change. Every room reacted differently. Some glared, some leaned in, some wanted her punished forever. Some wanted her transformed because they had children of their own and knew arrogance is often just immaturity fed too well. And then came the letter that changed public feeling one more time. It arrived at Judge Ruiz's chambers in August 2027 as part of a scheduled compliance update. The envelope was from Andre Bell. Judges receive all kinds of letters they cannot meaningfully act on, but this one was included in the public file because it related to the restorative process and ongoing sentence supervision. Priya Shah read it. Boone read it. Reporters got it through the docket the next day. Andre wrote that Caroline had completed every required hour to date, had never missed a restorative session, had personally funded adaptive sports registration for a group of injured children through a court-approved restitution overage fund, and had spoken at Zaria's school only after getting explicit permission and only after promising not to center herself. Then came the part that caught everyone. "I still walk with pain," he wrote. "My daughter still remembers the crutches. None of that is erased. But I no longer think the most important question is whether she suffered enough. I think the most important question is whether she stopped being dangerous. I believe she is trying, every day, to become a person who would never again ask a system to save her from the truth." That letter did not absolve her. It did something more uncomfortable. It complicated the audience. People love outrage because it is easy to share. Complexity travels slower, but when it lands, it lasts. Nina wrote a shorter update later that fall. She said she still had vestibular issues in grocery store aisles, still skipped fireworks with Mateo, still resented how long healing took. But she also wrote, "The woman in the courtroom on May 19th is not the same woman who sat across from us in July and answered Eve." Rai questioned without flinching. Again, not forgiveness, evidence. Even Mateo, now 12, agreed to attend the second restorative session. He brought the same drawing of the stop line, now folded at the corners. This time he added a note on the back. "I think people can learn if they stop pretending first." That sentence ended up on a poster for a school anti-DUI campaign with the family's permission. Hit that subscribe button if you believe kids sometimes understand accountability more clearly than adults with titles ever do. By the 1-year mark, people began asking a different question. Not did she deserve to go down? Most agreed she did. Not was the judge too harsh? Opinions varied. The new question was, what does justice look like when humiliation is not enough? Judge Ruiz was invited to speak at a judicial conference in Atlanta in early 2028, and without naming private details beyond the public record, addressed restorative sentencing in high-profile cases. One clip from that speech was watched millions of times. "We are very skilled," she said, "at making examples of people. We are less skilled at making changes in them. A sentence should protect the public, honor the victim, and tell the truth. If it cannot do all three, then we are mistaking spectacle for law." That quote reopened debate nationwide. Some hated it. They argued privilege had again found a softer landing under the language of growth. Others argued that 6 months in prison, 5 years supervised probation, 10 years without legal driving, public confession, and direct accountability to victims was not softness at all. It was a different kind of severity. The truth is, justice often disappoints anyone looking for a simple emotional ending. That is why this story stayed alive. It denied everybody the easy version. Caroline's father kept a lower profile. In March 2028, in a local radio interview no one expected him to give, Victor Langley finally said the words people had wanted from the beginning. "I did what powerful fathers do when they confuse love with rescue," he admitted. "I taught my daughter that consequences were negotiable, and then I was shocked when she believed me." It was not enough for some, but it was not nothing. Caroline herself never asked the court to shorten the speaking requirement, even after her probation officer noted exceptional compliance. She told the officer, in a line later referenced in a review hearing, "I spent years living as if inconvenience were injustice. I'm not confused about the difference anymore." By then she had spoken 58 times. At schools, at trauma centers, at DUI victim remembrance events, at a legislative panel on impaired driving reform, where, in a moment thick with irony, she sat 2 chairs away from lawmakers once eager for her father's endorsements. She always told the same core facts: same time, same location, same BAC, same victims, same text, same sentence. But she varied one thing depending on the room, the lesson. To teenagers, she said, "The scariest part of drinking and driving is not the crash. It's how normal your excuses can sound while you're doing something monstrous." To nursing students, she said, "Trauma does not care whether the person who caused it has good shoes, good grades, or good intentions." To civic groups, she said, "Public trust dies one small favor at a time before it dies in scandal." To parents, she said, "If your child never hears no from you, the world will eventually say it with an ambulance." 5 highly shareable quotes. More really, but none felt manufactured because they had been paid for in consequence. Like this video, if you believe the most memorable lines are the ones people bleed to learn. In June 2028, 2.5 years after the crash, there was one last scene that sealed the story in people's minds. It was not in a courtroom. It was in a middle school gym in North Charleston during a summer road safety event. Folding chairs, basketball lines on the floor, a projector screen humming, parents in work polos, kids half listening until real emotion makes children pay attention better than any assembly speaker can. Caroline had just finished telling the story again when a student asked, "Do the people you hurt hate you?" The room tightened. That is not a child's question adults enjoy, because it skips manners and goes for truth. Caroline answered carefully, "Some days they probably do, some days maybe they don't. My job isn't to manage their feelings. My job is to live in a way that doesn't insult their pain." Then from the back of the gym, a familiar voice said, "That's better." People turned. It was Andre Bell. He had come unannounced, Zaria beside him in a yellow sundress, taller now, missing one front tooth. He walked with less of a limp than before, but still enough to remind the room this was not a motivational fable. This was a body with a history. Andre came forward, took the microphone, and said, "I didn't come to make tea." His neat, "What happened to my family and to Nina's family and to Hassan and Mateo is still real. But I came because my daughter asked if people can become different after they do something terrible." He looked at Zarya. "Tell them what you said." Zarya shrugged the way kids do when they are about to say something wiser than the adults. "I said, if she tells the truth everywhere, maybe." The gym laughed softly, then fell quiet again. Andre handed the microphone back to Caroline. "Keep telling it true," he said. That was not absolution. That was permission to continue the labor. And in some ways, it was more powerful. Because forgiveness, when it comes at all, rarely arrives as a dramatic movie speech. It arrives as a boundary with a door cracked open. A sentence like, "Keep telling it true." By the final review hearing in November 2028, Judge Ruiz had one last public update to make before reducing reporting frequency under probation, not terms. Caroline had completed all custodial time, all treatment milestones, all early restitution benchmarks, and exceeded service hour targets. Her license remained suspended. Her sentence remained in force. But Ruiz noted meaningful compliance supported by independent victim reporting. When asked if she wished to address the court, Caroline said only this: "The worst thing I ever did was not the text. It was the belief behind it. The belief that my future mattered more than other people's pain. Everything good in my life now depends on never believing that again." Judge Ruiz nodded once. "That," she said, "is at least the beginning of wisdom." And that was the last courtroom quote people carried with them. Not because it was flashy. Because it was earned. So what is this story really about? It is about a drunk driving crash at 1:14 a.m. on New Year's morning in Charleston. It is about a white Range Rover, a shattered scooter, a child afraid of headlights, a nurse who could not trust her balance, a father who missed breakfast in a soccer game and part of the body he used to live in. It is about a senator's daughter who believed disaster could be managed if she stayed composed enough. It is about a powerful father who mistook influence for care. It is about a judge who understood that truth sometimes needs amplification, not commentary. But it is also about something harder. It is about how arrogance is usually built long before it is exposed. It is about how justice is not always the loudest punishment. It is about how humiliation can open a door, but only labor walks a person through it. Most of all, it is about the difference between being sorry you got caught and being changed by what you finally chose to see. Caroline Langley did not become admirable because she cried in court. She became, perhaps, less dangerous because she stopped asking to be the victim of her own consequences. That is a smaller transformation than Hollywood would want, and a truer one. Years from now, people in Charleston will still remember the phone on the table, the judge's voice, the speaker crackling to life, the words "these people" hanging in the air like a stain. They will remember the collective gasp when the room understood that status had been talking to itself in real time and did not realize the microphone was already on. But if the story matters, it is not because a powerful family was embarrassed. It matters because the people harmed were finally centered so completely that not even a senator's name could move them out of frame. That is the part worth keeping. That is the part worth sharing. That is the part that turns a viral courtroom moment into something more enduring than spectacle. Drop a comment telling us this. Did Judge Ruiz go too far, or exactly far enough, when she put that text on speaker for the whole courtroom to hear? Like this video, if you believe real justice has to tell the full truth, even when the truth is ugly. Hit that subscribe button if you want more courtroom stories where consequences are real, compassion is earned, and power finally has to answer for itself. And share this with someone who still thinks one good family, and one bad night should be enough to excuse a broken body, a terrified child, and a future nearly traded away for convenience. Because in the next story, we're looking at the case of a city contractor who laughed during sentencing, until one unexpected witness walked in with a box nobody in the courtroom was ready to see.